Hey guys, how you doing? So this is going to be a very different type of video than I normally make. It's unscripted, just kind of a ramble, I guess. A while ago, I made a video called Every Comic Publishing Website Sucks. Kind of about my experience publishing webcomics online and how difficult it can be to find like a good website that suits my needs and all that. And that video did very well, and it seemed helpful to people who want to start a webcomic. And so I thought, now that I have like 2 years of experience publishing comics online, figured I might go make a video going through my process of just how I put my comics together, how I find people to collaborate, how I collaborate with them well. This will not be a video giving specific writing tips, just because entire books have been written about that. People have dedicated their whole YouTube channels to that. I cannot fit writing. I will go off on a completely separate tangent if I start talking about writing tips, but I'll give a few. I'll give a few tips, but for the most part, this is going to be just how my process for how I write comics, and hopefully it can be for you too, because main thing I hear when people ask writers, how do I start a comic? How do I start writing? People, they'll just say, just write. You just start writing. And like, that technically is good advice, you know? Like, you do have to start writing if you want to write, and it can be hard to get over that initial hurdle of just like, oh, am I good enough? Should I even bother starting to write this? And you just go for it, just jump into it. But it can help to have some like baseline ideas of how to prep yourself up and get started. I'd say number one, have an idea, and that's the most subjective part. I can't tell you where to get ideas for your comics. You know, that's another question you get a lot. Where do you get ideas for your comics? There's no one answer. That is so subjective. Just either have an idea or you don't. You're gonna get an idea from wherever you get an idea, but I can tell you how to refine it. And that's just like, write it down. Get into the headspace of your characters. Try to like write down your characters. Ask yourselves questions about them, even like really minor questions, like what are their pet peeves? What's their favorite food? What's their favorite movie? If they have movies in the world you've created. And that's another thing. The world you created. If it's a fantasy world, what are the rules? What's like the political system, anything that is relevant to the story you want to tell. Make sure to have a very good idea of how everything works, how your characters think, how they talk. Think about scenarios, how your characters would interact with each other if they met. Think of like scenarios, you put your characters into different scenarios and just see how you think they would react. That can really help to flesh out your character and get you in a great space to finally start writing your comic. But don't fall into this trap of only focusing on that. I've seen so many artists and writers on Twitter be like, these are my OCs, I love them so much, one day I'm going to write a comic about them. And they never do. They just get so hung up on like, and this is my OC at a picnic and they are having fun. It's like, if that's what you enjoy doing, then do it. But like, you said you're gonna write a comic. Why haven't you done that? I think you just get trapped in it. It's much easier to write this sort of story, you know, where it's just to do this sort of fun planning stuff and not actually write the story. But when you're ready to actually start writing your comic, don't spend too much time establishing the characters and the world in your head and figuring out how everything works. Make yourself an outline, especially like either issue by issue, both issue by issue, and for the overarching story. You know, for each issue, where do you want your characters to start and where do you want them to end? Be that both physically and emotionally. You know, what journey do you want them to go on? Where do you want them to be at the start and at the end of it? Because like that will help you out a lot. Like, especially like in my early Dark Phantom comics, you can see that I wasn't doing this, and you can see a lot of instances where things just kind of happen, and it conveniently gets the hero out of a dangerous situation, and it doesn't read very well. It's not satisfying. It's much more satisfying if you can plan out everything in advance, and when you outline it, you can see like how all the pieces are going to fit together, how one thing leads into the next, leads into the next. And obviously, as you're actually getting into the script writing, things are going to change. You know, like you're going to maybe realize, oh, it's better to do it like this, or to do it this way, this way, this way. And that's fine, you know? That's why we're planning it in advance. You're gonna start seeing the cracks in your story, and you're gonna figure out how to fill them. It's problem solving. That's what script writing is, like 90% problem solving. Figuring out what's not working and how to make it work. That's a big part of it. Then the next part, we just start writing your script, you know? It's kind of, again, kind of subjective. It kind of feels like a just right, but hopefully now that you've outlined stuff, now that you have a better idea of who your characters are, you can feel more confident going into the writing part of your script. And in terms of like how the thing is laid out, I know that a lot of writers in comics, they'll post sometimes their pages of scripts, and each one will, each page will also have a panel layout. Like it'll say on the script, page 1, panel 1, this is happening. Panel 2, exterior, city, night. This character is doing this thing. I tend to not do that with my scripts. That's probably a failing on my part. I just have a very hard time envisioning how pages will look between the script writing phase and the illustration phase. So I just tend to like have it just be page 1, page 2, page 3. I space it out by pages so I know approximately how long the comic's gonna end up being. But I tend to allow my artists a little more leeway in terms of that, and that's something, and we'll talk about working with artists in a bit, but that's something you have to decide for yourself, especially if you're going with a third party for lettering. You probably want to have panel layouts so they have a better understanding of how you want your comic to look. And then once you have your script written, you know, you followed your outline, you know where you want your story to go, you know how you want it to look. It still might not be great. You still might, I recommend taking a week to sit on it. Maybe even like a month. I write my scripts out very far in advance. Like I have scripts that won't be seen for months, maybe even years from now, already written. And that's for a very specific reason. It's so I can continue to look over them as time goes on, as we keep working our way through all these scripts, and I can say, oh, I don't like this anymore. Oh, I've changed my mind of where I want the story to go, so I can change it. And these changes will sometimes range from just like, oh, this line of dialogue is going to be changed, to I'm going to scrap this whole thing and start over from scratch. So time is very useful for you. But again, you need to still be working. You still need to be making progress. You can't just sit, it's never going to be perfect. You can never just keep tweaking something until it becomes perfect. It's never going to happen. Eventually you have to release it, warts and all. When it comes to releasing, you're gonna also need an artist. And if you are an artist, great. You can draw your own comic. Perfect. You can write and draw. You're a double threat. But if you're like me and you're not a particularly great artist, you will need to find someone to draw your comic. And that can be a difficult process. And I'm not gonna lie to you. It's gonna take a while, and you're gonna hear a lot of rejection. You'll go to artists who you enjoy, who you see like they have commissions open. Maybe they work on comics, maybe they don't. Tristan, who draws Wonder Boy, she does not have a history of comics. Miki does. Miki has drawn comics before, but he's more of an animation guy. So even if you see someone who does not have much experience with comics, it's still worth reaching out to them if you like their art. Just, they might surprise you. But you're going to hear a lot of rejection, and that's mainly because you're inexperienced. People don't know who you are. And it's also a big project. People don't know if you're reliable, and this is going to be a lot of time investment for them. How much are you paying them? Paying them is very important. Do not try to not pay them. And you can work out between yourselves what your budget is. And you can tell, personally, I pay my artists about $350 per issue. If that's something you can afford, you can tell them that, or you can just tell them what your budget is, and they might say yes, they might say no. Don't treat it as an indictment of your character if they don't want to work with you and your budget. It's just, they just can't work for that much, and that's fine. Don't obviously know your worth, know your budget. Your artists will know their worth as well, and if you agree on something, great. You have a good artist to work with. And if you don't agree, move on to the next one. You will find someone eventually. It just might take a lot of hearing the word no. And you're just gonna have to get used to hearing no a lot. Once you do have your artist, I recommend getting on a call with them every time you're about to start a new issue, so you can go through everything, make sure you're all on the same page, make sure you both understand what you're doing, how you want pages to look. Collaboration is the key here. Collaboration and communication. Listen to what your artists have to say. Listen to their ideas they have for your scripts. Sometimes their ideas can honestly be better than yours. Like the way they interpret things that happen, the way they draw them out on the page, they could be better than what you had in mind. That's happened to me a lot. But at the same time, if they're doing something you don't like, don't be afraid to tell them. Don't be afraid to say, hey, can you change this? Can you make this scene work differently? Can you make this character, can you move this character over here? Whatever you need changing, don't be afraid to tell them. Don't be overbearing about it, but you need to tell them what you like and what you don't like. Because if you don't, neither of you are going to have a good time. Neither of you are going to be making the best possible comic you could be making if you're afraid to tell your artists what you want changed. But again, listen to their input. Listen to what they have to say, because they are working with the visuals of your comic, and so their ideas for what the visuals should look like might be better than yours. So yeah, just keep an open mind is basically the idea of this. Keep an open mind and keep an open line of communication. Try to check in at least once a week. Don't be overbearing, hey, get it done now, are you done yet, are you not done yet? But try to keep an open line of communication. Like I said, once a week is a good time to check in, hey, how's it going? And if they haven't made much progress, it's fine. You're probably not paying them enough for them to dedicate their entire lives to drawing your comic. But it's good to make sure the wheels are always spinning. Make sure you're always talking to them. Make sure you're always reminding them of that you exist. Once that's all done, once you know how to work with your artist, once you're all on the same page, you're going to pass it off to them, and they do whatever it is artists do. I don't know, I assume they just push the art button on their computer and it's done in 5 seconds. But let's pass it over to Miki, who draws Dark Phantom and Furious 5 for me, to see maybe he's got some crazy tips on how to do art or whatever.
Hi, my name is Miki Ramirez. I'm the current artist for Dark Phantom and Furious 5, and I'll be letting you know what kind of process I go through when working on an issue for Jack, and what you can do for working on your own comic / working for a client, and how exactly you can tackle this career / hobby. The first thing I say is know exactly what you're getting yourself into. Be realistic for a moment and do an overview of yourself and your productivity. How many drawings can you pump out in a month, or a week, or even a day? It's important to list out your strengths and weaknesses first before going onto a big project, and also to learn how to take advantage of said strengths and weaknesses to pump out more consistent work. Now, you don't want to go in cold turkey and overwhelm yourself when working on these things, so be sure to list all of those out. When working for a client, my best advice is to always keep to date with the information given to you. Always be 100% sure of what you're drawing. Make sure you read the script right, make sure you're always up to date with the information given to you. Even with every panel you draw, make sure you just go back and reread the scripts, because it's very important that you're on the same level with your author. Another thing I've learned along the way is communication. It helps not just the product, but it also helps you as an artist to be more professional with your own work, and also just how to execute someone else's ideas. Me and Jack never really spoke much until issue 7, and because of that, a lot of flaws can be seen in our first issues of Dark Phantom. But ever since we started talking on a one-to-one basis on Discord, podcasts, and overall just texting, we've been pumping out way more consistent issues with higher quality. The coloring is better, the layout's a lot easier to read, and overall, we made sure that my artwork complements Jack's writing and vice versa. When it comes to comic books, you don't want to just have one artist that just crawls in the dark and just pops out work every now and then. And the same goes for a writer. You don't want someone just handing you a script and then you giving the work. Both of those feel emotionless. You guys want to be good at communicating, or else it's just going to be in a consistent cycle that doesn't really have the best interest for either of you. And here's a great example of how we communicate. Take a look at page 3 of Dark Phantom 17. Now in the script, the page is about a man being harassed in the store by 3 thugs. When looking at my first draft, it gets straight to the point. When I first showed Jack, he said it felt way too rushed. So when I went back, I gave it way more detail, better pacing, and giving each member at least a single panel before Dark Phantom jumps from below. Here's my new draft, making sure I followed all of Jack's corrections. And there we go, a finished page of Dark Phantom. As you can see side by side, the difference is day and night, all because of a little communication. It really makes a long way when you actually know the person you're working with. Now there's a couple of little other things I want to say just to put in there, such as, just prioritize yourself at the end of the day if you're working for freelance or if you're working on your own personal work. Just remember that you come first, you owe nobody nothing. Even if you're getting paid, I would like to say that your health, your mental health, and your physical health matter first. At the end of the day, like I said, communication is key. Make sure you guys understand one another, but always take care of yourself. You can't pump out consistent work every day. You're a human being and you should remind yourself that. It doesn't matter who you're working with. You could be working with the king of comics or you could be working for a best friend. Working day and night on a desk is very unhealthy and it can really mess up your schedule. Even your work schedule can get messed up by overworking. So always remember just to prioritize yourself. You come first before work, especially if it's freelance. And these are just simple tips that I give to myself and other people who are working on comics. This is just what I do to make working on an issue easier every time. I try to make sure I get my deadlines, I take criticism, and I try to learn more as a person and more importantly as an artist when working on these things. And that's about all I have to say. I hope what I said motivates and helps people get up and do their own stories, or even just encourage them a little more to help out with others when it comes to freelance, work with your best friend, or even apply for a job.
So once the illustrations are done, there is one last step, and that is lettering. And lettering is simultaneously the simplest part and the longest, hardest part for me. I do not enjoy lettering. What I do is I put all the pages into Adobe Illustrator. I just kind of create a circle, like a speech balloon. You can see, you can read my comics, you can see what they look like. I just create a balloon, and then I create a circle, fill it with text, and I use a comic book font that I found online. And you can use whatever font you want. You can download one online, you can use a default one from Illustrator. Whatever you think looks best for your comic. Again, it's pretty subjective what you think is gonna look good. A few lettering tips that I have learned are always make sure that the tail of your balloon is pointing toward the mouth of your character. And this is a very amateurish mistake that I've seen a lot of people make. I made it for a while. I only learned it recently. But a lot of comic artists starting out, they will kind of do it too much. Like they will have the it'll be like directly into the character's mouth. Don't do that. Have it pointing in the direction. Like if I'm right here, the tail of the balloon should maybe be like right here, pointing at my mouth. Or like maybe the balloon is here, tail is here. Words are coming out of it. Like don't have it approximate the location of the character's mouth. Don't have it be directly connected to the person who is speaking. That looks tacky, that looks hokey, and it just looks wrong. Yeah, it just looks weird, it looks childish. That's really all there is to it with lettering, but again, having an open line of communication to your artist is key. Make sure, like, whenever you get new pages in, make sure you're saying, hey, are you leaving room for the lettering? Are you leaving room for the dialogue? Chances are they might not be. That might not even be something they're thinking about when drawing a script. And that can lead to some really cluttered pages, like you have to cover up entire characters with a speech balloon just because your artist left no room for the dialogue. So make sure that is something that is constantly on both of your minds when the comic is being illustrated, and it will save you a lot of headache when it comes to lettering. And after that, it's time to publish your comic, and I already made a video about how to do that, so hopefully this has given you some ideas of how to start publishing your comics. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. And yeah, that's pretty much my process when I make a comic. I still have a lot to learn. I'm far from a professional, so take all of my advice with like not a pinch of salt, but like a good amount of salt. I know what I'm talking about. I'm just not as experienced as other people. But hopefully what I have to say is helpful to you if you want to start writing a comic. But hey, check out these other videos on screen if you liked what you saw here. This is different from what I normally do, but I'm thinking of changing this to my normal style. I don't know, we'll see how this works out. Other than that, read my comics, links are in the description, follow me on Twitter at ClassActJack, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.